Quilts have opened windows and doors for me that I never dreamed were possible. I have met the most amazing people. I've been involved with the dealers, with academics, with travel to Japan and Australia and France. It's just been an unbelievable journey.
I think through these quilts, you can really trace the history of the country.
Quilts are the U.S. art form. Now, if you told me what the U.S. should send in international competition or something, it should be quilts.
It really did fuse high art and craft for me.
Quilts, to me, they convey such energy.
They're compelling and they touch people's spirit.
A quilt is about family, it's about history, it's about community, it's about work, it's about patience, it's about beauty.
Quilts are as flexible as you need them to be.
I have known quilt making to change women's lives. They provide a source of expression that a lot of women haven't had.
I often use the quilt as a metaphor. Our experience as Americans is like a patchwork quilt.
And once you've seen this film, it will change the way you look at quilts forever.
There was always these assumptions and attributions of, well, you know, Grandma was just sort of strange and it worked out in her by the unique quilts that she did. But really thinking about that and looking at all of Grandma's quilts may have changed your mind about Grandma had an agenda, you know.
And then I discovered this whole subculture. And it really is, I mean, well, like any specialty, we have our own lingo and we have our own superstars.
The quilt makers would definitely go by George Clooney to get an autograph from Ricky Thames, that's for sure.
Of course, textiles were a critical part of the ancient world, and they were a part of the world not only in the Mediterranean but also in the New World. And so I think of quilts as a natural descendant of the use of textiles in general throughout art history.
The quilt is really an American icon. It represents something at the heart of the American experience.
It wasn't just other quilters that wanted to look at quilts, and it wasn't just collectors that wanted to look at quilts. It wasn't even just artists that wanted to look at quilts. It was anthropologists and historians, and the stories that quilts told and the information quilts gave. They had this knowledge that wasn't anyplace else.
I really do believe that more and more sophisticated people really understand that it's just silly to go into these separations of calling quilts craft or art.
And for me, I never second guess a quilt or a fiber piece or a tapestry as a lesser piece. It's as good as, sometimes even better, as a painting.
And I think there's a parallel between how you read a quilt and how you read a painting. And I think once you see that those similarities are in both pieces, then you can make that leap between the painting that's on the wall and the quilt that's on the bed.
Well, I think quilts are increasingly an essential part of the art world. I think no major museum in America that deals with American art can afford to be without a quilt collection.
I think the Whitney was a proving ground in the belly of the art world, and when the New York Times added its imprimatur and other critics did, it was off to the races.
By taking it from the furniture, from the floor, from the bed, and putting up in the wall, it becomes untouchable and it becomes higher. I guess it becomes sort of a higher art because it becomes something for the sort of a feast for the eyes and a feast for the mind.
And I thought, my God, this is like a painting, but this is just so incredible. It was almost something physical. There was like emotion in there.
There are tremendous politics and competition, but I can tell you in the 20 years I've been in business, it's extremely competitive.
Let's be honest, it's a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry.
There are politics in everything.
Why would the quilt world be any different than anything else? It can be very petty, and it can be very tiring, and it can be detrimental, but it is a part of people gathering together with different opinions.
I think that artists ought to speak out on the issues of the day. And I am very aware of and concerned about political issues.
Boy, if you slip in a really strong message, it flies right under the radar and hits you in the heart.
The average individual that doesn't know quilting, they think it's dead, quilting is no longer existing, and I'm like, no, quilting is a thriving industry.
There's an enormous appetite on the part of millions of Americans for quilts and quilt making.
Quilts Inc. does a biannual study of the economic impact, and I think the last time they did that, we were up to like 3.5 billion just in the United States. That's a number that makes people pay attention.
Quilts are bigger than we think. They are memory objects for women, first and foremost. They're great works of art. They're political statements. They teach us about the Industrial Revolution and how fabrics were used and developed and traveled. You can't run out of ways that quilts reveal American history.
This is part of the American heritage. And I think you should really be proud of this, because it is a symbol of America.
Just opening up a quilt, the drama of opening up a quilt that has been folded, and suddenly you see this pattern emerge, and you can see it from across the room, and it's like a magnet. People start coming over, they're drawn to it, they're attracted to it.
Once they start seeing the imagery, they begin to understand it, the story begins to unravel, and I think that is how the message really comes through.
A quilt is everything. You know, I sleep under a quilt, and yet I can go to a museum and view one. Quilts are the quintessential American story.
Oh, a film like this can be a way of helping people stay grounded in their connections with the people who came before them and whose work has impacted and continues to impact their lives.
I've never run out of the amazing connections of quilts with American culture. I've wanted to make those connections for you, and this film will do that.
We as human beings have a lifelong love affair with the cloth. This is what we're swathed in from birth. It's the last thing we feel when we pass away. We cannot get away from the fabric. We can't get away from the cloth.